So tonight we're going to talk about food and what's wrong with our food. And I get reminded daily that a lot of people just don't get it when I tell them, well, just eat real food. And they say, I am eating food. And I tell them, no, you're not. And I'm just going to scroll down to the bottom of this lecture. Like this. That's not real food. That's real food. That's not real food. So we're going to kind of go through some of that tonight. Even some in my own family think they're eating real food and they're not. And we'll talk about why it even matters. So tonight's talk, what's wrong with our food? And really there's so much wrong with our food, this could be a 5-hour lecture, but I am going to keep it to an hour or less. So we're going to do a real overview, like a quick, and we're not going to touch on all the problems with our food, but some of the big highlights. Before we do, though, a couple new things came out in the news just since our last First Tuesday talk. JAMA, this article came out earlier in April. The obesity rates continue to rise. So now the 17-year-olds in America, 18% of them are obese. That's up from 14% a couple years ago. 14% of toddlers age 2 to 5 are obese. That's up from 10%. It jumped 14% in 2 years. And then 40% of those over age 40, men and women both, obese. So we continue to climb. Our obesity rates continue to climb. Saw a patient this week that was just so amazed that she lost 20 pounds in 2 months. When she'd been trying to lose for 5 years, she'd been trying to lose 20 pounds and it wouldn't budge and she was running half marathons, going to the gym 5 days a week and eating healthy. And she lost 20 pounds in a couple months by just cutting out grain and sugar. Another article that came out, the autism rates got published for 2014. We're always a couple years behind on these things. So it jumped again, 1 in 59 nationally. New Jersey leads the pack with 1 in 34. That's the slide I used to show. Back when I was born in the mid-1970s, it was 1 in 5,000. 2009, 1 in 110. And so this week, I think I saw this article, 1 in 59. Now, I will say asterisk on that. I had one of our state reps tell me one day that, and I'm sure he's right on the money, that schools get more funding if more kids are diagnosed or labeled with certain learning disabilities, including autism spectrum. So maybe there's some overdiagnoses or a little bit of gray where they'll just say, yeah, you're diagnosed on the spectrum. And I'm sure that could be part of it. But not 1 in 5,000 to 1 in 59. You can't blame all that on just the wanting to get more funding. Anyways, those are unrelated, sort of. They are actually related to food, but here we go. What's wrong with our food? I just have to start with this. We could just end it right here. This is what's wrong with our food. People think that's food. And I'm not against burgers and fries. We had burgers and fries this week at our house. But it wasn't this. It was an actual real meat, real vegetables, and sweet potato fries. But this is a project this, I think her name's Sally, did. She got a Happy Meal from McDonald's and put it on her counter. And she started counting the days. So here's day 137. That was day 0, the first day. Here's day 137. Hadn't changed much. Here's day 3007. It's changed a little bit. But real food won't do that. Real food can't sit on your shelf for a long, long, long time without obviously degrading. So what they had to do to food was give it shelf life. So how do you do that? You take nutrients out that spoil and you put stuff in that prevents the spoilage. Yeah, Sally Davies. You can go online and watch this project. I guess now that we're in 2018, we'd be up to almost 4,000 days or something. All right. So some general rules of thumb. Real food. When I say just eat real food, or your practitioner says just eat real food, it's that simple. And here's some little rules, guidelines you can follow. Your great-grandparents, what did they eat? And probably that's what you'll want to eat, like butter. How many ingredients are on the food label? Or does it even need an ingredient label? You should really be consuming mostly the ingredients, like tomatoes or cream. You shouldn't really have to have a food ingredient label because you're eating the ingredients. But like margarine, look at all those ingredients. If there's more than 5 ingredients in something, that's a red flag. If you can't pronounce some of those ingredients, that's a red flag. If you don't know what they are, that's a red flag. If your great-grandparents wouldn't know what they are, that's a red flag. So basic rules of thumb. The perimeter of the grocery store has more real food. The inner aisles have less real food or very little real food. Food can't be real if it's sitting on a shelf for a long time. So those are rules of thumb you can follow. I'm going to hone in on wheat in particular. There's 4 main things wrong with wheat. I don't have to use a whiteboard, I have slides, but I love whiteboards. I may just use it anyways. There's your 4 things. Those 4 things, modern wheat has these 4 characteristics that drive modern disease and inflammation. So the first, and you can see just the difference visibly there, einkorn wheat was the original wheat that we know of 10 to 12,000 years ago. I consider it the wheat that God made and put on the earth. Modern wheat is quite different. It was hybridized for lots of different reasons, but mostly to increase yields and decrease the susceptibility to drought and pest. So the modern wheat has 42 chromosomes, where the original wheat only had 14 chromosomes. So what's that mean? That means that's a lot of new combinations of genetic material that cause, here's the main thing I wanted to highlight. A genome for gluten, that means it's a new set of genes, new glutens that aren't in, this hybridized has this D genome, it's not even in the original wheat. In fact, if you do an ELISA test, which is an allergy test for gluten, those glutens aren't even on the test, the original wheat. People tend to not even react to those glutens. So what I'm getting at is the hybridization has caused new gluten proteins that the human race hasn't had to deal with before. And that's mostly what people are reacting to now, is all this new genetic information. Second is Roundup. Some folks can actually handle the gluten, except for the Roundup that's sprayed on it right before harvest. 80% of the wheat, not the wheat around here. The wheat around here is for hay and cows. Human consumed wheat is grown in the Midwest. And right before harvest, they spray it with a desiccant, they call it, but it's glyphosate, which is the main ingredient in Roundup. I might not make it an hour even. I'll really set my record now. My voice is going out. But the reason they do this is a couple reasons that I know of. Number one, it stresses the plant. So right before harvest, they're going to spray it. It'll stress the plant. A stressed plant's going to put a little more seed out. I think it's about 10% more yield when you can stress that plant right before harvest. And it dries it out, makes it easier to harvest, and then it kills the crop so they can come in and put their second crop in the ground quickly thereafter. So this is right before harvest. They're getting a good dousing of glyphosate. So what's that do? Well, glyphosate does, this isn't going to be a glyphosate lecture, but I'll just skim over the surface. Y'all can go back and listen to a couple radio interviews I did with some experts on glyphosate, but it's a chelator of minerals. It grabs the minerals and won't let go. And we're already demineralized enough, but that just kind of finished us off. It's an antibiotic, so it kills bacteria. The bacteria in your gut is susceptible to the glyphosate. 1/10 of 1 part per million of glyphosate will kill your gut flora. And depending on what food you're talking about, the legal limit for glyphosate is 8 or 9 parts per million or up to even 40 parts per million. 1/10 of 1 part per million will kill your gut flora. And I'm not going to get into what gut flora does tonight, but it's very, very important for us. So, Roundup. If some people, if they only ate organic, if they just got the Roundup out, they can handle the wheat, the gluten part of things. I mean, this article was saying it's not the gluten, it's just the Roundup, it's both. In some patients, it may just be the Roundup. In other patients, it may just be the gluten, but for most people, it's both. Glyphosate also opens up the gut barrier. Your gut should be tightly sealed closed from your mouth to your anus. It's like one long water hose, and it should be, the tight junctions is where the cells meet. Those tight junctions should be tightly closed so nothing can penetrate through, because the inside of that water hose is still the outside world, and we want to have a good barrier to the outside world. But those tight junctions are opened up with glyphosate. And when those open up, particles can come across your gut lining and hit your immune system. 80% of your immune system resides just inside your gut lining. And so when you have particles coming across through that leaky gut, we call it, then the immune system gets very disrupted, damaged, berserk, haywire. Autoimmune disease is associated with leaky gut. So that's problem number 2, the desiccation of 80% of our wheat. It's not just the wheat. I mean, it's in everything. Anything that's Roundup ready. GMO basically is genetically modified organisms are put in to bring in the Roundup ready gene so that it can be sprayed with Roundup. So your corn syrup in your drink and your ketchup, your GMO soy that they're going to put in the filler into the meat. Your cows are eating the corn and soy, and that's where the cheese, modern dairy is. We'll get to that in a minute. But the canola oil that everything's fried in, so really the whole meal you're consuming a fair amount of glyphosate. Now, this is not wheat, but I just saw this article this week, so I put it in. The Freedom of Information Act was invoked to get these emails from internal FDA. They've been studying our food for a couple of years, but they haven't officially made their report or released their report. So Freedom of Information Act, some guys were able to get some internal memos and emails, and basically this article has some FDA, the guys that are looking at, the scientists that are studying the foods, one of them just grabbed a bunch of food off his shelf in his own personal home and brought it in to test it, and in the email to his colleagues said, man, everything I brought in, everything has Roundup in it, from granola bars to, crackers and everything. I think broccoli was the only thing he brought in from his house that he couldn't find any residue of Roundup in it. So it's everywhere. All right, number 3, iron in the food. So fortification of the wheat. Not just wheat, other foods are fortified too, but wheat in particular. In the 1940s, we started adding iron to the grains. And the problem with that is twofold, probably 20-fold, but 2 main things I'll talk about tonight. The type of iron they put in. It'll say, it'll just say iron possibly as an ingredient, or reduced iron, or ferrous iron, or iron sulfate. But basically there's different names for iron filings. It's literally small, tiny particles of iron as demonstrated in this video. I was going to do this tonight, but I ran out of motivation and energy and time. But basically what they did was take baby food, oatmeal in one of the videos, cereal, like cornflakes or various cereals. You put them in a little blender, add some water, blend it up, and then you pour it into a Ziploc bag, get a magnet, run it over the bag, and you'll pull out the iron filings. And so you can do this at home with your kids and have a nice little experiment. It needs to be a strong magnet, I'll tell you that. And it's in anything that has wheat, that says enriched with iron, from baby food to spaghetti to crackers to you name it, is potentially going to have this type of iron in it. So that disrupts your gut. As you can imagine, leaky gut has also been associated with these iron filings. On top of that, though, our iron recycling system in the body is exquisitely designed. 98% of the iron that you're going to need for bodily function comes from, not your diet, but comes from the recycled iron that's already in your body. And you're going to just hang on to this iron and not let it go. 98% of your needed iron is going through the recycling system. So dietary iron, we could easily consume what we would need. A milligram a day would be plenty. And you get that in vegetables and beef and just normal foods. We really don't need it added to the food. That was something that was done based off of maybe incomplete information. And they started adding the iron. So most folks have way too much iron in their body. Even if you think you're anemic, typically the iron's just stuck in your tissue, in your joints, in your organs, in your liver, in your brain, in your thyroid, in your adrenals. The glandular tissues in particular tend to hold the iron. And iron can't move out of those tissues unless you have enough magnesium and copper. Magnesium and copper are depleted in our food, and under stress we deplete them even more. My point is, we have a lot of iron in us since the 1940s on. We recycle it very well, and we're eating food like this. Iron is your number one driver of oxidative stress at the cellular level. That was proven in 2016 by a study that came out. The inflammasome is what they called it. Inflammation, as most people know now, is at the root or the common denominator of all disease, from Alzheimer's to autism to heart disease and cancer. But when you track inflammation down at the cellular level to what chemical process is actually happening, the very first domino to fall over in all the cascade of chemicals that we call inflammation is NLRP3, and it is triggered by iron, excess iron in the tissue. So that's a big problem. Dr. Thomas Levy, who's a pretty well-known integrative physician. I interviewed him a couple weeks ago on our radio station. I'd recommend the interview because you'll learn a lot. But look him up on YouTube also, and he does this iron food experiment. And he talks about his own personal story where he got off gluten and his arthritis improved, but he had to be very, very, very strict. And one little bite of hamburger bun and his thumb would flare up on him again. But once he started honing in on this iron thing, and he started dealing with excess iron by donating blood, he discovered he could eat a little gluten and his thumb didn't flare up. So for him, it was more the iron fortification of the wheat that was driving his inflammation. So some people, it's going to be the iron more than the Roundup or more than the gluten, and usually it's a combination of both. Fourth thing, so the new glutens, the Roundup that's sprayed on the wheat, the iron that's added to the wheat. Thank you, Tommy. I like to look professional. Fourth, sugar. The sugar content of wheat. People think, I'm getting off sugar, I'm going to eat sugar-free. Well, number one, that's wrong. If it says sugar-free or zero sugar, that's because they put artificial sweetener in, like aspartame, which is NutraSweet, Splenda, which is sucralose. Both those are very harmful to your health. We're not going to get into that tonight, but stay away from sugar-free stuff. But even if you got sugar out of the diet, got sugar-free stuff out of the diet, but you were consuming wheat, which the lady this week in the clinic that lost 20 pounds in 2 months, that's what she was doing. She thought eating healthy meant get off sugar, and kind of, yeah, but the wheat turns into sugar. And the point of the back cover of Dr. Davis's book here, the 2 pieces of whole grain bread will turn into sugar, blood sugar, quickly, faster than a can of soda, as fast as 2 tablespoons of sugar, Snickers candy bar. So people don't realize that when you consume wheat, it readily digests into sugar, and that's because amylopectin A, it's a starch in the wheat. And in the ancient wheat, there wasn't a lot of amylopectin A. In modern wheat, there's a whole lot of amylopectin A, the starch that turns quickly into sugar. So, there's your issues, brief overview with wheat. You could dive deep into each one of those. Just the topic of iron fortification is huge. I've spent 10 radio interviews with Morley Robbins talking about just pretty much that. Of course, Roundup is a whole lecture in and of itself. Wheat belly, I've pretty much beat that horse to death, I think, over the years, so y'all can go back and watch those videos. So if any of this is piquing your interest, if you're new, on Facebook Live, you're just now first hearing this, go back and watch some of those original videos because we go into more depth. But trust me, modern wheat is not real food, and it drives inflammation. Ancient wheat is real food, but with all real food, you still have to think about God's original intent. Like with fruit. Fruit isn't around 24/7, 365. I mean, it is for us. We have grocery stores. But originally, that's not how it was. And the sugar content of fruit these days, it's been hybridized to be more sugary. But the same with wheat. If you think about wheat in ancient times, it was very, very difficult to grow it, harvest it, and grind it, and thresh it, and all the things to get just a cup of wheat. So, I mean, it wasn't this huge consumption of wheat 3 times a day, every day, their whole life. It was kind of a delicacy back in the old days. What's wrong with our food? Number 2. After wheat, sugar. And here's 68 different names for sugar. It's a challenge to eat healthy, and it's a challenge to eat just real food because they code name it all these different things, and you're trying real hard, and you don't realize that saccharose, I don't even know what that is. It's sugar. Mostly anything that ends in OSE is going to be sugar. Obviously things that say sugar, any kind of corn syrup, high fructose corn syrup, all that's just sugar on steroids. Sugar spikes your insulin. Insulin's a hormone that tells you to store fat. You can't make a fat cell without the signal, the permission from insulin to make a fat cell. So the lady this week that lost 20 pounds in a couple of months was amazed, and I just explained to her, well, running half marathons every day, or not every day, but routinely, going to the gym every day, it has nothing to do with your insulin. I mean, that exercise is good for its own benefits, but not to lose weight. Weight is purely a hormone issue. There's hormones that tell you to store fat, make fat cells and store it, and there's hormones that tell you to unlock that fat and burn it. So once you realize that, you just control those hormones and take control of your life. Insulin's your number 1 fat storage hormone. It's produced when you eat sugar or grains that turn into sugar, or any carb that turns into sugar, including fruits that turn into sugar. So for some folks who are very challenged in this department with weight, and they've been that way for a very long time, they may have to get real aggressive with 0 grain, 0 sugar, 0 fruit for 30 days, 60 days, or however long, to really aggressively drop the insulin level. Then once you're healthy, you can go back and add in some natural sugars occasionally in moderation, like our great-grandparents would get through a pound of sugar in 12 months, and we get through it in 3 days on average, 2 to 3 days, average American. So you can go back and add the einkorn wheat that doesn't turn into sugar that fast. You can do some honey and maple syrup occasionally, even the organic cane sugar occasionally, once you're healthy. So it's not this never, ever, ever again. But if you're inflamed, you've been sick, you got a lot of disease, you've been sick a long time, there's a lot of disorder in your body, you may have to get very aggressive and totally fast from sugar and things that turn into sugar. There's a lot of sugar in drinks, and people, a lot of times, I think now everyone realizes, but some still don't, how much sugar is in, obviously, soda is a whole lot. There's 22 grams of sugar in 7 ounces. And the tricky thing about this soda, I mean, back in the 50s, I wasn't alive then, in case y'all were wondering, but the can of soda was like 6 ounces, I hear. And there was a little bit of sugar in it, and there was a little bit of salt in it. And then it went to 8 ounces, then it went to 10, then to 12, then to 16, now to 20 ounce. Well, every time they added more salt. They added more salt because it makes you thirsty. Sodium, not real salt, Celtic salt, but just sodium chloride, table salt. When you consume sodium, and then you also consume a diuretic like caffeine that makes you urinate out your water, you're going to get thirsty and want to go drink some more. Well, no one's going to drink salt water, so they've got to add more sugar. Every time they increase the salt, they got to increase the sugar, and increase the salt, increase sugar, increase the quantity, and it's just been this elevation of sugar to now we're up to these huge amounts of sugary drinks and salt. Sodium by itself is very harmful to our health too. Well, there we go. the 1950s up to where we are now. Our sizes have increased and our sugar content's increased. And it's not just the Cokes. There's other things, these energy drinks like Red Bulls. I mean, you can see how many teaspoons are in these various things. But some of the juices, like this fruit juice on the end, orange juice, grape juice, you think you're being healthy with fruit juices, or your kids are on fruit juices, or grandkids. It's one of the worst. Gatorade, same thing. Okay, so here's if you just did 1 bottle a day for 1 week of each of these things, which many people do. They grab a Gatorade and think they're going to be okay. That's how much sugar you'll get in a week just by doing a bottle of each one. So sugar is sneaky. I mean, that pure leaf tea on the far right, there's a lot of sugar in these teas that you get at Allsups. You think, oh, I'm going to stay away from Coke, so I'll go to the tea. Flip it over and read the grams. There's like 34 grams per serving. And that bottle's probably 2 servings. So 64 grams is what you're getting. And our goal is keeping it under 10 grams. So you got to be real, real careful with tea and all these other drinks that you think are healthy, especially fruit juices. All right, good fat, bad fat. Oop, I meant to delete that one. This is the third thing wrong with our food. They put a bunch of fat in there that's not beneficial for your health. Canola oil, soy, cottonseed. These fats are very high in omega-6. Omega-6 is pro-inflammatory. You want anti-inflammatory. That's omega-3. All I can tell you is the omega-6 ones that they put in the food are cheaper. From what I can tell, that's the only motivation to put them in there. Their shelf life is long and they're cheaper. And when the motivation is shelf life and profits, and that's what you'll do. But there's 7 cell membranes between your lung and your mitochondria. Your mitochondria is what makes your energy for your cells to work right. The mitochondrial membrane, the cell membrane, the membranes of the blood vessels, 7 total cell membranes between your lung and that mitochondria. The mitochondria needs oxygen to make energy. So you'll have energy, but also so your cell can work and function and do what it needs to do. Your brain cell can fire off, your immune cells can fight germs, your hamstring cell can run, contract, and you can run further. So oxygen is obviously very important, but the cell membranes are made of fat. If your cell membranes are full of canola oil and soybean oil and cottonseed oil, omega-6 rich fats, they repel oxygen. The omega-3 rich fats attract oxygen. So you don't want to be full of fats that drive inflammation and repel oxygen, or your cells and your mitochondria won't work right. You won't have enough energy. Your cells will be dysfunctional. When you have dysfunctional cells, you have dysfunctional organs. Organs that are dysfunctional create symptoms. We call them diseases, and we treat them with a pill. When oftentimes we just need to get the right amount of fat into us. So margarine, same thing. Crisco, same thing. If man has altered the food and altered the fats from what your great-grandparents ate, most likely it's not going to be beneficial for you. So olive oil is good.
I just wanted to throw in on the fats you're talking about right there, the Crisco, the Puritan stuff I used to work for Procter & Gamble. 6 years shelf life before we pull it.
6 years shelf life. So that right there will tell you. You don't want to put that in the body. This seems common sense, but somewhere along the line we lost our common sense and we let someone else start making decisions for us about what's healthy for our food or for our consumption. So try to eat real fats, real butter, lard, tallow, olive oil, coconut oil, avocado oil, fatty nuts like pecans, walnuts, macadamia nuts. Those are good healthy fats. Avocados, full fat dairy, which we'll talk about next. It's really apples and oranges. Milk today, conventional dairy, it's not really even milk anymore. I'm just going to skip to this quote from Dr. Deborah Gordon. Conventional milk is an ultra-pasteurized, homogenized, chemically altered liquid heated to remove pathogens and bacteria and to prolong its shelf life. There's the big shelf life word again. The resultant low enzyme activity makes it difficult to digest. The altered fat content renders the vitamins and minerals difficult to absorb. And the residual chemicals, hormones, and antibiotics pose a threat to human health. The quote continues, I didn't put it. She said, anyone that wants to drink that raw milk is insane, basically. You would never want to drink raw, conventional milk. Those cows are not in a natural environment. They're in a feedlot eating unnatural, high-protein grains, soy and corn mostly. That alters their rumen content, the bacteria in their gut. It acidifies it. It allows the bad bacteria to grow, like E. coli, Salmonella, Shigella, and all the other bad pathogens because of the altered pH of their gut, because of their diet. They're given hormones to increase production, and they're given antibiotics to deal with all the disease that's sitting in a feedlot, eating food that's not your natural food. The hormones, the antibiotics, and the pathogens all come through. They heat it up to a high temperature to kill the pathogens. So the pathogens are dead, but the bug parts are still in the milk. So that's a pretty deadly combination, liquid combination, as she says. It's not even, you really can't call it milk. When you compare at the molecular level what raw grass-fed milk is to conventional milk raised like this, it's not even a comparison. So milk produced conventionally does need to be pasteurized. The homogenization, basically you can think of that as taking the good fat that's in milk and forcing it through through a hose with a filter on it, a fine mesh filter, and it breaks the fat particles up into these tiny little particles that are not healthy for you. And they're oxidized. Oxidized LDL cholesterol is bad. And it will drive inflammation in your coronaries. And it's created by the homogenization. So breaking up the good fats, not only does it decrease absorption of your fat-soluble vitamins, but it drives inflammation. So real milk straight out of a cow that our ancestors have consumed for thousands of years has it has all the essential amino acids you need. Basically, you could live off real milk if that's all you had on a desert island. It has the 8 essential amino acids, 60 different enzymes, full of probiotics, vitamins, minerals, and all the enzymes you need to digest the proteins that are found and the sugars that are found in the milk. All those enzymes are there. It has natural antibacterial, antiviral, and antiparasitical enzymes and proteins naturally in the milk. Of course, when you pasteurize it, you kill all those enzymes and proteins. Very, very, very nutritious. It has the good fats that you need. Dr. Jerry Tennant put it best, which he's a pretty well-known integrative physician, was a well-known ophthalmologist. He invented the LASIK laser for the eye. He got really sick himself, and he had to go integrative to heal himself. And his basic motto is give the cell what it needs and avoid what it doesn't. And he uses raw milk as one of the foundational tools in his nutrition program to give the body what it needs, because it literally has all the raw materials, the vitamins, minerals, fats, and proteins. Those are the building blocks for a cell, and it has them. But when you pasteurize it, the studies that are out there, this is just a few of them, you decrease copper, magnesium, vitamin C, and B6. You decrease beta-lactoglobulin, which is what helps you absorb your vitamin A. Retinol. Retinol is a key component for many different chemical reactions in the body that I won't get into tonight, but listen to my radio show from this week, and we talked a lot about retinol. Of course, the bacteria are destroyed by pasteurization. The enzymes are destroyed. When you destroy these enzymes in the milk proteins, it's harder to digest, and people will start reacting to those because it's harder to digest. We talked about the homogenization, the fat. A great website to get more facts and information, realmilk.com. Tons of good information and Q&As on there. And their mission is to make real milk more readily available and accessible across the country. We're blessed to have 2 different dairies, raw milk dairies in our area, Abernathy and O'Donnell. Field of Dreams Dairy and Peoria Pastures are good raw milk dairies locally. All right, so why does this food even matter? Linus Pauling, the only guy to win 2 Nobel Prizes. You can trace every sickness, every disease, every ailment to a mineral deficiency. I think you could throw a vitamin in there too. So where do we get our vitamins and minerals? From our food. We don't just breathe them in through our air, osmosis through our pillowcase at night. So this is a really smart guy who said a pretty bold thing, but we get it. Y'all get it with rickets. Everybody knows rickets, not enough vitamin D. Scurvy, not enough vitamin C. I mean, these are things everyone knows. But it's not just, these handful of diseases from vitamin deficiencies. There's a cell, and actually this is only 1/10 of the cellular interaction network. There's like 10,000 different dots on there, and really there's a million. The way that a cell communicates, and one enzyme talks to another, and the cascade effect that's going on in our cell. This is one biochemical pathway. It's hard to read even if you're up close. That pathway is full of minerals and vitamins. Your cell can't work without these minerals and vitamins. And I'm not taught that in med school very well, that nutrition matters, but it does matter. Here's just one little piece. I think it's this little piece down here, I think. The citric acid cycle. And this is just your B vitamins, B1, 2, 7, 3, 5. They're highlighted there in yellow. That's the B vitamins and where they're needed in that one little pathway. That's not talking about vitamin C and D and A and the minerals, all the different minerals. So the cell won't work right. It is that simple. It needs these vitamins and minerals to work right. So we've showed this slide a lot of times, but for the new folks, 1900s, here, all the minerals, magnesium, cobalt, calcium, zinc, iron, copper, magnesium, selenium, phosphorus. These are many of the different minerals and trace minerals that our body requires. And so there was a fair amount of these minerals in our soil in the 1900s. But when we brought in man's wisdom and started tilling the ground, when you uncover the ground, you expose it to the UV light and you kill some of the bugs in the soil. The bugs are what liberate the minerals off the rock, stone, sand to get it into a water-soluble form your plant can take up and put into the fruit, vegetables, and leaves that we eat. So mechanization means tilling. They started breaking the soil in the late 1920s, and you can see the mineral content starts to go down. Then the ammonium nitrate kicks in. That's your fertilizer to bring growth. You get tonnage, you get the green and the tonnage, but you don't get the trace minerals because the plant grew too fast. Because you will get fast growth with ammonium nitrate. But you don't have time for the trace minerals to come in, so our levels started going down more. Pesticides and herbicides kill the bugs even more in the soil. When you kill bugs in the soil, you can't get the minerals out of the soil. So we go down even more in our food content of minerals. And then the big one is at the end, glyphosate we talked about already. It's a chelator of the minerals. So now we're down to 2010 and we pretty much ran out of minerals. So that's what's wrong with our food. It's nutrient deficient. Then we take it and process it, pull out the good fats and any other remaining nutrition and put in preservatives and stuff to give it shelf life. We spray stuff on it, we add stuff to it. And I'm not even getting into microwaving our food. That's a whole nother issue. I don't want to freak y'all out if you're new about microwaves, so I've already freaked you out enough probably. So I get this question all the time. We have to grow food this way. We have to have 10,000 acre wheat farms in the Midwest, and we have to spray all this stuff on it, and we have to farm this way to feed the world. Every time I bring this topic up on the radio or anywhere else, I'll probably have someone on Facebook send that in tonight. Doc, we have to, or else they'll starve. Everyone will starve. Well, I'm not so sure about that. Number one, the foods we subsidize the most and grow the most of, corn, soy, wheat, are the 3 things I aggressively pull all of my patients off of initially. The grains and the sugar, because it drives inflammation. Well, all my patients aren't starving, so I think we'll be okay if all those crops. Now, I know what they're saying. Well, in the third world countries where there's drought and famine and there's food shortages, and I've been to Africa. I know, I've seen the food lines in the orphanage. I was there, and they make the porridge and they hand out the foods. So I understand we're saving people's lives, and I'm not going to minimize that, from starvation, but they're malnourished. And after 10 days of taking care of, I don't know how many hundreds of orphans I saw in that 10 days, my take-home message to the leadership, because we brought duffel bags of medicine and we ran out in like 2 days. Medicine's not the answer. Neither is the porridge. It's a short-term fix to save their life, but they need to grow food. They need to grow real food. So they need a good livestock management program. They need a good gardening program. They need color. They need purples, reds, greens, and yellows. That's where the medicine's at in the food. So that was the focus and the encouragement that I gave is, let's teach some farming techniques so we don't have to just continue to keep them alive with a malnourished porridge. So Polyface Farms, Joel Salatan, he teaches young farmers how to take 100 acres or 200 acres and make a living. Net 100 grand or more, 150 grand. And he puts 200 cows on a half section, which ranchers around here would say you're crazy. Holy Cow Beef here locally. About 3 or 4 weeks ago, I interviewed Weldon Warren. Go back and listen if you're a rancher and you're interested. 200,000-pound mama cows on 320 acres for 6 months, and they gained, I think he said 3.45 pounds a day average. Those are pretty wildly crazy numbers if you're a traditional West Texas rancher who puts 25 cows on 600 acres or something like that is a typical ratio. And the way he does it is the way Joe Salatan teaches, is this high-density grazing. It's mimicking the ancient buffalo herds that used to roam up and down the plains, and they would mow the grass down, but they keep moving. They don't stay in one spot. So these guys will quadrant off that 320 acres into little 10-acre paddocks and move these cows every day, every 2 days, every week, or whatever. And when those cows go through and mow it down, they pee and poop, they tromp on, and then they move off of it, it stimulates growth of that grass in an abundant way. And you get so much more, the seeds that are stuck in the soil are actually allowed to come and grow. And so what these guys have shown is you can basically turn an almost desertification, in Africa where there's just sand everywhere. Alan Savory has before and after pictures where he's taken these plots of land that look like desert and now they look like a rainforest. I mean, all this grass will come back when you manage it appropriately and you rotate these animals appropriately. So Polyface Farms is in Virginia, and he has conferences and workshops, and I encourage young farmers to look at him and his techniques. He's written many books, pretty famous guy. I'm sure he's on TED Talks and YouTube and everything else. Never Sink Farm. This gentleman, $350,000 gross on, I think it's an acre. Could be 5 acres, but I'm pretty sure it's 1 acre or 1.5 acres. Vegetables, lettuce and tomatoes mainly. $350,000. It can be done. It is being done. It's not being done here too well in West Texas, but there are guys out there doing it, and he does it with a no-till, healthy, organic way. When you can manage your soil and get your soil healthy, it will produce for you. Whether you're producing grass to feed livestock or you're producing vegetables, you'll get production. BackToEdenFilm.com, I highly recommend. Paul Gauci, this technique of just keeping the ground covered. He covers it with wood chips. His garlic is as big as a softball. His cucumber's so juicy, you'll ruin your shirt with cucumber water if you take a bite out of it. The insects drowned. If a pest come and takes a bite off his garden, they drown, so they go away. His neighbor will have pests, the bugs, the insects, but his garden won't. It's an amazing technique, and all he has is a rake. The production that he can get out of a backyard garden could feed the whole neighborhood. BackToEdenFilms.com. You can produce a lot of food in a very small space. Victory gardens, World War II, a third of the country had planted victory gardens, 20 million different victory gardens. The production of food was estimated to be 9 to 10 million tons of vegetables, which equaled the commercial production in the whole country. And that's just with a third of the population having a victory garden. So it can be done. This notion of we got to feed the world with these massive farms and all the grain is inaccurate. I know that's what we're doing now, and if we just stopped it today, a lot of people would starve. So I'm not saying that, but it's not the best way to go about it. It's not the most beneficial thing for your health or for the world. All right, so some of the good things about food. This is also why food matters. And I literally went to a couple websites that I typically read, and these are just articles from like this month. I mean, we could spend days going through all the scientific literature of all the different extracts they've found in these different foods that battle inflammation, battle cancer, cognitive, like this one, mild cognitive impairment. And this was a powdered blueberry, not even the whole blueberry, which, I mean, it's better than nothing, but imagine if you ate the whole real fresh vine-ripened blueberry. Twice a day, I forget for how many days, but they had better cognitive scores, less memory decline. If they follow this study out, what they're going to show is less Alzheimer's, just from blueberries. Everything else stayed the same in their life. Their lifestyle and their diet otherwise was not unchanged. Avocado seed husk, all the different health benefits noted in this study: anti-cancer, antiviral, anti-inflammatory, anti-obesity in the husk of avocado seed. So think about that next time you're making your avocado whatever. Try eating some of that husk. Here's a cranberry study that helped the gut bacteria to digest certain foods. Now the gut bacteria need food to live. They need prebiotic, basically fiber. And if you can put enough prebiotic into your gut, then your gut flora will be very, very healthy, will grow and multiply and diversify. A diversified gut flora is associated with lots of healthy outcomes. And we won't do gut flora talk tonight, but go back and listen to a previous talk. There's bugs in the gut that break down gluten. There's bugs in the gut that break down BPA and glyphosate and all these pesticides. There's bugs in the gut that make vitamin C for us and B vitamins for us. There's all kinds of health benefits from the gut bacteria. So you want to feed your gut bacteria. Cranberries do that quite well. Beetroot juice in heart failure. Exercise capacity was increased, significant increase in exercise duration, peak power, and peak oxygen uptake. The heart was beating stronger and more efficiently just from this beetroot juice in heart failure patients. Apples and pears cut the stroke risk in this huge study, 10 years, 800,000 different patients, 52% reduction of stroke. If that were a drug, a 52% reduction with using a drug would be a blockbuster. This is one on strawberries. Reduced this particular flavonoid in a strawberry reduced inflammation. There's that husk, avocado husk. I had that in twice. Anti-cancer effects. Lemon. There's so many different compounds in not only lemons, but all these different fruits and vegetables. And we isolate some of them and study them. I mean, there's probably 100,000 of these compounds. Imagine in combination. I mean, there's no way to study them in combination. And then what if you took the lemon and the blueberry and the strawberry and the cranberry and you consumed them all together? The beneficial effects of consuming these real foods is unbelievable. But this was, they took D-limonene, which is one of the chemicals in natural plant chemicals in the lemon, and it had a potent anti-cancer effect. So this leads to, I meant to put a slide in that says, because people ask me this all the time, can food cure cancer? Obviously, that study showed this one particular chemical in lemons had anti-cancer effect, and there's a whole lot more than what's just on that lemon. And then there's plenty of resources out there that I've been exposed to and others have been exposed to, and they bring to me and they ask me these kind of questions. Can food cure cancer? And my answer is no, it can't. Cancer can't be cured, according to my training at MD Anderson, by anything but chemo, radiation, and surgery. But really, if you pin those guys down, they'll admit that chemo can't really do it either. It can reduce the number of cancer cells down so low that finally the immune system can wipe out the last few. Similar to an HIV patient who gets a bacterial infection. HIV patients don't have an immune system. That virus knocks out their immune system. So these guys catch any little germ, any little bug, any little strep throat, could kill them. So we load them up with antibiotics whenever they get a little fever. Well, these guys and gals will still die even sitting there on IV antibiotics. You can pump these folks full of antibiotics and the germ still wins. Well, why is that? Because antibiotics can't ever fully kill all the germs all the way to zero. They can reduce the level enough where your own immune system can kick in and wipe it out. And same with the cancer and chemo is what most oncologists, if you really press them, will tell you. So these kind of folks that we'll go through here, and that people bring me these books and websites and ask me to comment on it, these are spontaneous remissions. The cancer goes away spontaneously, just like it came spontaneously. We don't know what causes cancer. According to the American Cancer Society, we know a lot of risk factors. So if cancer spontaneously comes, it can spontaneously go away. It appears when you start studying spontaneous cancer remissions, which we have studied, literature's published on it, it appears that folks who give the body what it needs and avoid what it doesn't need, meaning nutrition, hydration, movement, oxygenation through movement, and peace, the body's equipped with what it needs to do what it was designed to do. Everyone understands the immune system designed to identify and kill cancer cells. So spontaneous remission appears to occur in folks who do a better job of equipping the body with all it needs. So Dr. Gerson in the 1940s, his testimony is 50 cases of results of 50 cases in the cure of advanced cancer by diet therapy. So what his statement is diet therapy cured cancer in these 50 folks. He went on to present 10 of those cases to the Congress. I've talked about this before. It's on the title page of that book, which I have over here if anyone wants to see. It talks about the Joint Committee for Foreign Affairs, I believe, 1952 or 47. He took 10 of these patients with him to Congress and presented their cases of cancer that spontaneously remitted. Lorraine Day, UC San Francisco, head of the department of the trauma surgery department. Breast cancer she found a lump, was biopsied breast cancer. She had a lumpectomy. The margins were not clear, so there was some of the cancer was left in her. She refused chemo and radiation, decided to go do some all-natural therapies in Mexico, did 40 different all-natural therapies, and got worse. And basically was on her deathbed, as she states in her testimony, and she was on 60 Minutes telling her story. On her deathbed, she felt like God told her there's unforgiveness in your heart. And what she claims now is that there's 10 steps to health, a big part of that being nutrition, but the main part for her was dealing with unresolved emotional conflict of unforgiveness. And that's getting into quantum physics, which relates to food. It turns out food, not just food, all of us vibrate at a certain frequency, and food has frequency in it. And so quantum physics you're getting into vibrational energy and frequencies, where Newtonian physics is just particles. It's just lycopene and magnesium and copper and minerals and all these particles. That's Newtonian, particles. And you can get down in a particle size to an atom. An atom is protons and neutrons and electrons, but below an electron's a quark and then a tachyon, and then you get down to you transition into quantum. And quantum is over my head too. And if my brother would be watching tonight, he'd be laughing at me. Ben's talking quantum physics, he's in over his head. I wasn't that good at physics. He was. He's an engineer. But quantum is vibrational energy, and food, it turns out, has vibrational frequencies and energy. Water has vibrational frequency and energy. There's studies that show water even has memory. These frequencies will resonate and they will change based off emotions and thoughts. But anyways, that kind of gets into Lorraine Day and unforgiveness. So that's a whole nother realm. There is a lot to the human body is what I'm getting at. Food is a big part of it, but the vibrational frequency in food is something that I'm not prepared to talk about really tonight, but I'd want to throw that out there to you to understand that real food grown in the right way in nutrient-dense soil, vine-ripe and consumed by us has many great benefits. I got to meet this great Dr. Gonzalez at a conference in 2012, I think, out in California. Super nice guy. Very humble and very dedicated and passionate guy. Very brilliant guy. Went to Columbia, Vanderbilt Med School, and then Columbia for his internship residency in immunology and oncology. And he met a patient who had a spontaneous remission of late-stage breast cancer. And this lady told Dr. Gonzalez that she did some therapies, nutritional therapies. He didn't believe her. He looked into it. The head of the oncology department at Sloan Kettering encouraged him to look into it, to basically debunk it. And it turned out, 6,000 charts later, that there are a number of patients who followed this protocol who had spontaneous remissions. So it intrigued him. And he went on to study and spend his career studying it. And these are two books, Volume 1 and Volume 2. Volume 1, 50 pancreatic and breast cancer patients. And then Volume 2 is 62 patients that he documents very thoroughly. He's an intellectual, academic-minded researcher type medical doctor. Very, very thorough documentation using this nutritional protocol. I would still contend that what these folks are doing to get spontaneous remissions are giving the body what it needs. And nutrition's a big part of that. chrisbeatcancer.com. It's a great website. I hadn't been on it in a while. That's Chris. He had stage 3 colon cancer, metastatic colon cancer. He refused chemo. I was scrolling through his website, and he talks to this gal, which I had read this article about Miss Ferguson in Britain. And basically, I think she had multiple myeloma. The doctor said nothing more to do, and she got on turmeric, curcumin. That's a spice. And then she had a spontaneous remission, and her doctors were amazed and had never seen that before. Chris interviews her. This article about food, tree nuts in particular, cutting the risk of colon cancer death in half. Then he interviews a lot of stage 3 and stage 4. This was breast cancer gal. An interview about fasting, very beneficial. That's the other part of food. Not eating food occasionally. That's another problem with our food in America is it's readily available. It's at every street corner. Our pantries and fridges are full. We have too much access to the food. So we could add that to the lecture. It's too available. We're in a chronically fed state. And when you fast, which all cultures have done traditionally forever, either they were forced to or for religious reasons, when you don't consume food, not only does your insulin level obviously drop, which is very beneficial. Insulin's pro-inflammatory, remember, and it tells you to store fat. But when you don't consume food, you induce cellular apoptosis. That means programmed cell death. Your cells are designed to kill themselves if they're starting to go rogue, if they have too many mutations, if they're starting to multiply inappropriately, i.e. cancer cells. There's a switch for cell suicide. Well, when you fast, you initiate that more aggressively. The mitochondria, the energy production factories in the body, some of those start to run inefficiently. Like instead of running at 100 miles a gallon, they're down to 2 miles a gallon. Well, you're supposed to kill those off. If your mitochondria is not healthy, they're supposed to die. When you fast, you'll clean out your inefficient mitochondria and your inefficient cells. So fasting's a whole nother kind of piece of this food topic.
I want to throw something in real quick. consuming again actually produces additional stem cells in the blood.
Yep. Increased stem cell production with fasting for sure. The point I'm making here with this guy's website is there's a lot of good testimonials of these spontaneous remissions. So we really need to be studying this more aggressively. Unfortunately, studies take money and the funding is limited for studies on food and fasting and spontaneous remissions. But again, the reason I'm pointing this out is because food does matter. It's a big part, I believe, of those spontaneous remissions. So the take-home message is eat real food. If man's touched it, be leery of it. The more man touches it and gets his hands on it, the more the nutrition value goes down and the toxicity value goes up. So try to consume local grown food if possible, like this and not that. More like this, not like that. Real food, that's the name of the game. So be encouraged. If y'all are new in the back, we really focus on the 4 pillars: nutrition, hydration, movement, and peace. And we do that because it appears to me those are the 4 basic things that the body really requires to function normally. And you need all 4. We obviously talk about food a lot, but you need all of them. You can not do any of those and stay inflamed, stay sick, and all a pharmaceutical can do is treat the symptom. Type 2 diabetes is a great example. Medicines treat the high blood sugar, but medicine doesn't treat the insulin resistance, which is the cause of type 2 diabetes. Food and fasting from food can deal with insulin resistance. So it's going to be a big part of what we do is nutrition. Supplements are okay, but that's not, I don't think you can supplement your way all the way to health and wellness, all the way to wellness. Supplements are needed when we can't get it in the food, so I'm not anti-supplement, but we're not just going to switch you from pharmaceuticals to nutraceuticals. We're really going to encourage you in the diet and lifestyle. That's ultimately what's going to heal you. So, questions? Anybody? Yes, ma'am.
3 food questions. Do you know anything about, have you ever heard of tiger nut flour?
It seems like I've read that. I don't know anything about it, but I think I may have heard of it. Nicole, have you heard of that? Mickey? Tiger nut flour? That's your nutrition experts.
As far as good or bad in what way?
Well, I mean, I just saw,
Yeah, I don't know how it
I saw a recipe using it, and I didn't know if it was okay or not.
Yeah, it should be fine, but I don't know how it tastes because I haven't made it.
Okay, in terms of eggs, when you see eggs are labeled that they are vegetarian fed or organic fed, what's the difference? And is that okay?
I don't know. I guess an organic fed, they could feed some sort of animal-based product that was organic, and vegetarian, they won't feed any animal-based food, I guess. What I look for on an egg is, well, I just get them out of my hen house, but if I were going to buy it...
What is your address?
3161. If I were going to buy eggs, I want them to be free-range, pasture-raised. Mickey and Nicole, is that the official terminology? Pasture-raised, yeah. Now, there's some local guys who have taken it a step above that, not only pasture-raised, but they move these chickens every day to new pasture, new forage. Alcove Farms, probably.com. So that's a step above, not just pasture-raised, but rotated daily. Is very beneficial. Back to the nut flour. As far as any flour, is it good or not? One of the kind of ways to tell if something's good is the glycemic index. Glycemic index is just a measure of how quickly and how high your blood sugar will raise when you consume any food. So you could Google glycemic index and fill in the blank, whatever food you're interested in, tiger nut flour being that one, And it'll give you a number, and if it's around 50, 55-ish or below, that's pretty good, meaning it's not going to spike your sugar, therefore not spike insulin and inflammation. So that's kind of a general rule of thumb. I mean, whether something turns to sugar or not isn't the only thing to consider, but it's a big one. So,
Okay, my last question is hot dogs. These are called cold ones. They're called uncured hot dogs. No antibiotics, no hormones, no animal byproducts, all vegetarian fed, all natural ingredients. But it doesn't say grass-fed.
right.
So are those okay?
Okay, compared to some other ones, yes. Good, better.
Talk about Hormel.
Good, better, best is kind of, when it's stuff like that, that's how I start to think. There's good, better, and best. I'd like to get best, always,
And
but
that's not bad.
no, it's not best. But I can't always get best. And if I were somewhere where I had to have a hot dog and there were a couple of options, Oscar Mayer that, I'd go with that. But if I'm going to routinely buy some sort of hot dog, whether it's once a month or once a week or whatever, I'm going to seek out the best. If I know it's a food I'm going to consume fairly regularly, I'm going to try to get the best.
And that's grass-fed.
Mm-hmm. I prefer all beef, but you can do pork too. If you can find someone local, grass-fed, naturally raised pork, and it's processed locally, and like there are some folks, and Juicy Lucy with their farm truck or their food truck, she's got lots of different pork. And it's not hot dogs necessarily, but it's sausages, different types of German sausage and stuff.
All right, thank you, and I'll be quiet now.
Well, that's okay. Thanks for coming and asking.
Someone else has a question.
Someone Facebooked a question today. I think she was going to watch on Facebook Live, asking if we test the gut microbiome and if I'd heard of Viome, V-I-O-M-E. And yes, I've heard of Viome and I've used Viome. And basically what they're doing is sequencing a sample of stool to tell you what kind of bacteria you have in your gut, what's colonized in your gut. So yes, we've done it, but we don't do it routinely. I found it didn't really change our recommendations on what we recommend you to do and to eat. So yes, we could if you really wanted to, if you came here and really wanted to, we could. We have access to that test, but I don't find that it changes what we do, so we don't really do them. And it's fairly expensive too.
I'll ask you this, how do you feel about testing in general? Often you go to a traditional doc and you do tests out the wazoo. But just from a general approach.
Testing in general, what do I feel about that? I think it's the primary benefit of testing is to educate and motivate the patient. How much does it change what we really do? Well, I mean, I saw a gentleman today, his ferritin was 1,200, which is iron in your blood, and it should be less than 20, is what the most recent studies in the world's authority on iron, Dr. Kell in England says it should be less than 20. Your lab reference range is 20 to 400, so he was 1,200. So obviously for him it changed. We got real aggressive with blood donations, therapeutic phlebotomies. So it can definitely alter our recommendations, but in general, your blood's going to show you're inflamed, and we're going to institute an anti-inflammatory diet and lifestyle approach, and when you come back, you won't be, it'll be less inflamed. Your cholesterol will normalize, your blood sugar will normalize, but it's good for patients to see that, it motivates them, and then it rewards them and encourages them. But if people can't afford it, or weren't even going to come here, it's not life or death that you have to, and I'm just not big on testing. Most functional medicine doctors are trained to do $1,000 to $2,000 worth of testing to look at every pathway and vitamin and mineral and intracellular levels of hormones and this and that. And you'll get a lot of great information. But does it change what we ultimately do? Not really. So if a patient's real curious, we can, but I'm not that big on testing. We do a basic panel for patients that are looking to come here, a very basic, comprehensive. Wait a minute, those are, is it basic or comprehensive? I say it's basic because it's pretty darn cheap, but it's comprehensive. Liver, kidney, cholesterol, sugar, vitamin D, insulin level, iron levels, thyroid levels. We do those kind of tests. And then we encourage you to do diet and lifestyle things that will normalize those tests typically.
Got a few people on Facebook asking questions about the basics of fasting. I'm referring them to the radio shows, but do you want to just touch on it real quickly and I'll push it back over to
Yep.
you?
The basics of fasting are pretty simple. You just don't eat. There we go. And it really is that simple. Jason Fung, F-U-N-G, he's an MD, nephrologist in Toronto. He wrote a book called Obesity Code, and he really goes into it a lot. He's on YouTube. I encourage y'all to look at his interviews or videos. I interviewed him on the radio last year sometime. You can go back and listen. And he really uses it therapeutically for his diabetic patients, and he finds that they're able to reduce their blood sugar dramatically and even get off their medications eventually. So it's really that simple. You just don't eat. Now, really probably for someone who's in the chronically fed state, which is your average American, it's best to start with, I think, number one, just start reducing your carbs. So cut the carbs, replace them with healthy fats. Your cell can use a fuel, sugar for fuel or fat for fuel. And if you're a standard American, you're heavy on carbs and sugar, and you're just a sugar burner, carb burner, and if all of a sudden you take that away, you can crash and burn and feel really bad. So gradually reduce your carbs and increase your good fats. Over time, once you feel pretty comfortable there, then skip breakfast. And, then skip 2 or 3 breakfasts a week. And then go 24 hours. And then eventually get it up to 48, 36, 72. 3 to 4 days, really 4 days is where a lot of benefit really comes in. But you'll feel better, you'll have less kind of side effects and the blood sugar crash and all that if you can get more onto a high fat, moderate protein, low carb kind of eating plan before you fast, is my recommendation. High good fat, not canola, cottonseed, and margarine and Crisco. Butter, coconut oil, avocados, fatty nuts, eggs, full fat dairy. Some people like to do water fasts, and that's great. There is whey water fast that is very good too. There's bone broth fasting. You could do a juice fast. Those are great. You're getting lots of nutrients in, but you have to be careful there. You don't want to get your blood sugar spiked up. Then you're kind of defeating the purpose of the fast. So you don't want to juice sugary stuff. So juice fasts are great for certain benefits, but if you're really trying to drop insulin resistance and induce apoptosis or help with weight loss, I would just do water fast.
At what age, this woman's asking about children, 10, 12 years old, is fasting appropriate for a child?
I probably wouldn't do it. I tell my 11-year-old who asks me sometimes to fast, no. And that would be my answer probably from just about all 11-year-olds. If they're concerned about weight, then I would do some other things. Dietary modification, cut the grains and sugars way down. Maybe even all the way out for a time period if they're quite a bit overweight or if they're type 2 diabetic. Dr. Fung may have a different answer. And I mean, if in a severe case, a diabetic kid and nothing's working, I might consider it, but definitely under medical supervision. Okay. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Facebook Live, for tuning in. I'm not sure about next month because I'll be out of town, so we may just skip it or we may do it another day. We'll put it on Facebook though, so stay tuned. And really the summer in general, I'm not totally sure about. We got a lot going on this summer at the clinic and at home, so we'll see, but stay tuned. We'll announce it on Facebook.